Welcome to FilmIn5D, the show that follows everything film in the 5D Mark II. I'm your host, Aaron Hemmick, and this week I give my thoughts on the new Canon DSLR, the 5D Mark III.
Hey, nice jersey there.
Hey, you like it? A little tribute to my boy Peyton. So like most people, I haven't got a chance to work with this camera yet, so this episode will be more of a reaction to the camera's specs than a hands-on review. As some of you probably know, there are two things that the Mark III absolutely had to include for me to warrant an upgrade. It had to address the moire and aliasing issues, and it had to have 1080p 60 frames per second. Therefore, I want to start off by saying that I will not be upgrading to the 5D Mark III anytime soon. While they supposedly fixed the moire and aliasing problems, no full HD slow motion was the biggest disappointment for me. But I still want to give you all of my thoughts on the camera and how it specs compared to the 5D Mark II and Nikon D800. I'd like to briefly mention the improvements to the photo side of this camera. Now, since this is a filmmaking podcast, I rarely focus on the photography side of things, but the 5D Mark III had several nice improvements. The biggest improvement in my mind was the 61-point autofocus, which dramatically improves on the 5D Mark II, which had only 9 autofocus points. Now, this doesn't matter much for me, since most of the time I use my camera for video and autofocus is not available. Also, whenever I'm using the camera for photography, I mostly focus on landscapes and objects versus actual people, and therefore I'm still shooting with manual focus. The other notable improvement comes in the form of the resolution, which increased from 21.1 megapixels to 22.3. Now I'm just glad they didn't decide to go super high with the resolution here, because 21 megapixels was already enough for me, and 22.3 will resize the 1080p video perfectly, which should remove aliasing. Next, I'll address the video side specs of this camera, but first, a new segment where I answer your questions on the show.
Alright, hey there everybody. I got a question on YouTube from Part-Time Hobby. Thank you for the question. He wanted to know how we got the dream look in the short film Death, and here we are, we're in Premiere, we're looking at a still right here from the film, and it's got this kind of soft look that you often see in dream sequences. And you know, there are several ways to do this. There's no one way, but I'm going to show two ways that I know how to do it, and one, which is how I did it for this particular short, was using Magic Bullet Looks, and it was an effect called telecine net or telecine net. I don't know what it's called. It's a film. It's an actual film like negative thing like that they used to use before post-production on videos. It basically takes the negative and blooms it. So here all the dark areas, all the black areas, the shadows, you're gonna see it bloom a little bit, and gives it that kind of look. And to show you what I'm talking about, let me disable this effect, and you can see pretty much the look is generated just from this one effect. I mean, I have saturation on here, and I have gamma, and I have shouldering, and I have curves, but the majority of the effect is this net, this telecine net. And so yeah, that's how you use it. And obviously you can do parameters over here and stuff, and strength, and it varies, and obviously that's going to bloom it even more if you go less on that, and you can change the size and stuff. But yeah, there you go. And if you don't have Magic Bullet Looks, there is one way I kind of made up. I don't know if I made up, but I'm sure other people have used it. But one way that I like to give a dreamy look, if you don't have a program like Magic Bullet Looks, is you just duplicate your layer right here. So right here this is what it looked like. This is just right off the camera. And if I add a Gaussian blur, which I already have up over here, if I add it to the bottom layer and I turn it up quite a bit, I don't know, like 45 I guess, and if I lower the opacity of the top layer, the bottom layer is going to start to bleed through. So like right about there is pretty good. You can see if I click on this bottom layer and I disable this, you're going to see the difference that you're creating. It's way different obviously than just blurring just one layer. If you blur just one layer, obviously it's going to all be blurred out, but if you do this kind of blend with the two layers together, and the one on the bottom is the blurred one, and then you, like I said, drop the opacity of the top layer, you're going to get this nice little dreamy look. If you don't have Magic Bullet Looks, or another way this is a very quick way to get the dream look. And I hope you enjoyed. If you have any specific questions for things you've seen on the show and you want to see it answered in a segment like this, just leave a comment, or you can send us an @ mention our FilmIn5D Twitter page, and we'll try to get it answered on the show. So thank you.
I've already mentioned that the Mark III will likely have minimal moire issues, which is attributed to the new processor in the camera, the Digic 5 Plus. This is probably one of the features that's most appealing to me because I get moire a lot, especially when conducting interviews and my subject wears a striped shirt. However, the price point of this camera, which is almost twice the cost of the Mark II currently, doesn't warrant the upgrade for me, especially when I can pay $400 for a filter that basically eliminates moire completely. Another great feature is the dual memory card slots, and I was very happy to see that they went with both a CF and SD card slot. This will not only give you more shooting time, but also gives you the ability to back up everything to an extra card. Also, you can now shoot up to 29 minutes and 59 seconds continuously, which is broken down into 3 separate files. Yay! I guess. I mean, we showed you in a previous episode how to use Magic Lantern to do pretty much the same thing. But hey, it's an upgrade, I guess. Some other minor improvements include 100% viewfinder coverage, which doesn't really matter for me since I only ever use the LCD anyway. Increased ISO performance, it now goes all the way up to 25,600 in video mode, and improved LCD resolution, which looks to be a nice upgrade. There are several other improvements, but they just make the Mark III a full-frame 7D in my opinion, so if you want to hear my thoughts on those features, check out the review I did on the 7D here. However, there was one big issue that I should address, even though it wasn't one of the 2 things I absolutely had to have, as mentioned before. The Mark III still has no clean HDMI out, which basically means you have to shoot in the H.264 codec, which is super compressed and not the best for color correcting. If it did have the clean HDMI out, it would allow filmmakers to shoot RAW onto an external device, which would avoid lost information with compression. This is where the Nikon D800 comes in, which features a clean HDMI out. But in terms of picture quality, we'll have to wait and see, but shooting RAW should be possible for video. Also, the D800 has autofocus for video, which isn't so great for films, but if you use this camera for a bit of everything, this feature can definitely help you for shooting birthdays or weddings. As I mentioned before, the biggest issue I have with the Mark III is its price point. $3,500 is a lot to invest in a camera that's trying to replace a Mark II, which was already great in its own right. This is why the D800 might be a better option, being $500 less and all, but in my opinion, if you have a Mark II already, you should stick with it for now because I really don't see enough improvement here to warrant a pricey upgrade. And if you've been waiting on the 5D Mark III for your first full-frame camera, I would at least recommend that you consider your options. Remember, you can probably find a lightly used Mark II for half the price of a Mark III. And from what I see, the Mark III doesn't look twice as good as the Mark II. But that's it for this week. Send any questions to me via @mentions on twitter.com/AaronHammock, or you can leave a comment below for a chance to have your question answered on the show. Follow the show's Twitter @FilmIn5D and give us your thoughts on this week's episode, or if you're on Facebook, you can like our page at the link below. And we'll be back next week to give our thoughts on the 5D Mark IV.
Mark IV?
Yeah, you haven't heard about it?
I think you're just pulling my leg.
How do you know? You don't keep up with Canon rumors and stuff. You don't know.
But they're just announcing the 3, aren't they?
Yeah, well, why not? Why not get the pop ruin 4 years from now and probably do Mark IV? Or the 7D Mark II, I don't know. We'll see.
Sure.
Anyways, see you next week. Oh, what the I just barely touched it and it scrolled all the way back down.
I think you're off script, dude. But
How do you know? How do you know that's not what it says? Can you see it? Did you write this? I didn't think
it
so.
was sent to me so I could okay it.
Yeah.